After Ray Charles passed in 2004, his home in the View Park-Windsor Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles, a quiet, affluent, and predominantly black community known as the Black Beverly Hills, sat uninhabited for years. The house was a time capsule. Red carpets, dark wood paneling, velvet curtains. The grand piano still sat in the center of the sunken living room, untouched, dust-covered, but untouched. In late 2022, the house was quietly bought by a young couple from Atlanta, Darius and Chanel Monroe. He was a financial advisor working remotely. She had recently left teaching to open an online clothing boutique. They'd been searching for a home with history, charm, something they could restore, photograph, and show off on Instagram. This house seemed like a dream. A rare deal in LA, large, private, with the kind of musical legacy you couldn't fake. Started small. The first night, Chanel woke up thinking she'd heard music. Faint piano notes. Just 3 keys played like a question. When she told Darius the next morning, he laughed it off, might be your imagination. You sure it wasn't a dream? They found the piano had shifted slightly overnight. Only a few inches, but enough to notice. She started hearing it more often. Always at night. Sometimes it was just the soft creak of a piano bench. Other times it was a full measure slow and off-key, like someone testing old fingers. Darius didn't believe any of it, not until he saw the chair move. It was mid-afternoon. Chanel was upstairs. He was on a Zoom call. The piano bench, caught in the corner of his eye, slid back half a foot on its own. He didn't say a word. He simply ended the call, walked outside, and sat in his car for 2 hours. They brought in a local spiritual advisor, a woman named Loretta. She was older, in her 70s, and had grown up in the area. When she walked in, she stood silently in the foyer and said, "He's still here. What do you mean?" This was more than a house. It was a sanctuary. He made peace with himself in this place. That kind of energy doesn't just leave. She didn't want money. She just asked them to stop touching the piano. Don't move it. Don't clean it. Don't try to make it your own. They listened for a while. But as months passed, they wanted to renovate. The retro charm turned into a burden. They hired contractors. Demolition began on the 2nd floor. They planned to turn the studio room into a nursery. Chanel was pregnant by then, and that's when things escalated. The lights would blow out even after rewiring. The AC failed repeatedly. Contractors started quitting. One said he saw a man standing in the hallway mirror, wearing sunglasses, even though the hallway was empty. Chanel started having dreams vivid and terrifying. In them, she was blind, sitting at the piano, forced to play while a man behind her whispered, "Not like that. Again. Again." The dreams turned violent. She'd wake up with scratches down her back, as though dragged by invisible hands. She begged Darius to leave. He still didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in the way she cried when she said, "It's like the house doesn't want us here." In October 2023, they moved out without selling the house. Left furniture, clothes, even their baby's ultrasound photos still on the fridge. Just walked out. The home is still empty. Locals say you can hear faint music at night. 3 notes, always the same. And sometimes, when the street is completely silent, if you get close enough to the door, you can hear someone whisper from the other side, "I ain't done playing." The studio was on the 2nd floor, behind a heavy door that didn't match the others in the house. It was thicker, darker, and oddly warm to the touch, even when the rest of the hallway was cool. The previous owner had reinforced it, possibly for soundproofing, but standing before it, Chanel often felt the urge to knock, as if someone might answer. The inside was all wood. Paneled walls stained mahogany, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on one side, and black acoustic tiles running along the ceiling in diagonal lines. At the far end stood the control booth, still intact, with faded labels, mismatched knobs, and a window yellowed from years of cigarette smoke. No one used this room now. The couple had agreed early on to keep it closed out of respect, maybe, or fear. Chanel couldn't explain why, but she felt it wasn't meant to be touched. The air in there felt older, heavier. When she stepped in, it was like walking into the past, into a place where time paused and sound waited. But something changed in the fall. It started with the smell. First it was cologne, faint, masculine, the kind you'd expect in the 70s. Sharp, smoky. Sometimes it came through the vents late at night. Sometimes it hung just outside the studio door. Darius blamed the old insulation. He was always trying to be rational, grounding her. Then the cigarettes came, not the new kind, but those stale, bitter wisps you only smell on old coats at thrift stores. She could taste it in the back of her throat sometimes. It gave her headaches that stretched into the early hours. And the baby started kicking more aggressively on those nights, almost panicked, like it wanted out. Darius still didn't believe her. He worked late in the downstairs office, often with music in his headphones to stay focused. But the longer they stayed, the more he began noticing things too, not the big, dramatic stuff he'd always assumed ghosts would do. Just rhythms. The light in the hallway outside the studio flickered every night at 10:17. Not before, not after. Exactly then. One of the motion sensors near the staircase would go off even though the house was still. Doors that had stayed open all day would swing shut softly, as if pulled by a breeze though no air ever moved. And the humming always in the background. Sometimes low and steady, sometimes cracked and broken, like a man trying to remember an old tune but getting the notes wrong. Darius started recording it on his phone, trying to catch it. But every time he played the audio back, there was nothing. Just silence. Or static. By November, the studio began to change. It was subtle. The lights, which had long stopped working, flickered back to life one night without explanation. Chanel walked by and saw a dim amber glow under the door. She called out to Darius, but when they opened it together, everything was dark again. Still, they found footprints, though clear as day in the dust. Bare feet. A man's size. From the center of the room to the edge of the booth and nowhere else. As if he'd stood there, just for a moment, then disappeared. That same week, the piano downstairs played on its own. 3 notes. Low, soft, questioning. Chanel stopped going upstairs. She stayed in the living room or kitchen, never alone. Her boutique orders piled up, untouched. She didn't want to go into her office anymore. It was next to the staircase, and the staircase had become wrong. Something about it felt off balance, like the house tilted toward it. She started keeping the baby's ultrasound tucked into her robe pocket, like a charm. She stopped lighting candles. Every time she did, the flame would bend not toward the windows, but toward the hallway, as if something were breathing. One night, Chanel woke up to music again. Not 3 notes this time. A melody, full and rich and achingly sad. It came from the studio above them. She lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart drumming so loud she couldn't hear the end of the song. She didn't go up. In the morning, she found the door wide open. Inside, the recording light on the old booth panel was blinking, the kind that hadn't worked in 2 decades. And in the corner, the wooden chair was pulled out, sitting there like someone had just left or hadn't. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. There was no reason to go inside the booth. It was small, cramped, even the kind of space that always felt a little too close to your skin. A sliding glass window separated it from the main recording room. The glass was tinted from years of nicotine and age, making everything outside look the color of weak tea. Dust coated the soundboard, thick enough to trace letters with your finger, though neither Darius nor Chanel ever dared to touch it. And yet, that morning, the blinking light on the recording panel seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Slow, rhythmic, alive. Darius stood in the doorway, staring. He wanted to be angry, to convince himself that maybe some electrical fluke had jolted the ancient light to life. But it had no power. They hadn't rewired the booth. No technician had touched it. He knelt down, checked the plug, followed the wire. It led nowhere, and still it blinked. Chanel didn't speak. She stood a few steps back, one hand over her stomach, the other gripping the edge of the doorframe. She wasn't afraid in the traditional sense anymore, not startled or hysterical. It was deeper now, quieter. She had entered the part of fear where everything slows down, where your body accepts that something is deeply wrong and all you can do is endure. Darius stepped into the booth. The door didn't creak or slam or do any of the things you'd expect in a haunted story. It just clicked shut, softly. Inside, the silence was dense. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was compression, as if the air had thickened around him, flattening everything else. He tapped the window once with his knuckle. The sound didn't carry. Felt like he was underwater. And then he heard it. A voice. Not loud, not angry. Just soft. Male. Old. Gentle but low, almost a breath, almost a song. "She don't belong here." Darius froze. The words came from right behind him. But when he spun around, the booth was empty. His back hit the wall. He stood there, pulse climbing, fists clenched. He didn't say a word. Didn't yell for Chanel. He waited, listening. And then again closer this time. Right at his ear. "Take her out. Take her out this house." That night, Darius didn't mention what happened. He sat on the edge of their bed in the dark while Chanel slept, scrolling through old news articles on his phone. He went deep, deeper than before. The house had no tragic deaths, no headlines, no suicides, at least none that had made it to print. But there were stories, buried in the corners of fan forums and local history blogs. In the early 90s, after Ray had gone fully blind, he'd shut out most of the outside world. The studio became his retreat. He'd record not for albums, but for himself. Tapes no one ever heard. Sessions that went until sunrise. Rumors suggested he'd speak into the mic as if someone were answering long, one-sided conversations about life, pain, and regret. He'd weep. He'd whisper. He'd play 3 or 4 notes over and over until the engineers fell asleep in their chairs. And sometimes, according to one old assistant, he wouldn't let anyone leave the house for days. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. He believed someone else was there. Someone only he could hear. The assistant, known only as Leon in the forum comments, claimed Ray once told him, "If you hear them in the booth, don't answer. Don't ever answer. Just play. That's the only way to keep them quiet." The next morning, Chanel woke up before dawn and found Darius sitting on the staircase, staring down the hallway toward the studio. He looked hollow, not terrified, not even tired, just emptied. Like something had reached inside and taken the part of him that questioned things. She sat next to him, close. "You heard him, didn't you?" she asked. He didn't nod, didn't speak, but he didn't deny it either. "I think he's warning us," she whispered. "Not threatening, just trying to stop something." "Stop what?" She hesitated, fingers resting gently over her stomach. "I don't think he wants a baby in that house." The house began to shift in the weeks that followed. It didn't do so dramatically. There were no slamming doors, no flying objects. That would have been easier to explain, easier to run from. No, it changed its temperature, its mood. The walls felt tighter, like they had swollen inward. The colors darkened, especially after sundown. Paint seemed to absorb light. The mirrors grew foggy even without humidity. And music played every single night. Not just piano now. Bass, snare, a voice humming in time. It wasn't angry, it was sorrowful. A kind of grief-made sound. One night, Chanel walked into the kitchen and stopped cold. All the cabinets were open. Inside every one, taped to the back wall, were old yellowed index cards. She hadn't seen them before. She was sure they weren't there. On each card, in neat, looping cursive, was a lyric, not one she recognized. Not printed, but handwritten. The one that made her cry read. "If I had one more song, I'd play it backwards just to take the time back." December came quietly, like the breath held before the plunge. The days were short and pale. The house, despite the Christmas lights Darius half-heartedly strung along the banister, never felt festive. It was silent in a way that wasn't peaceful. The silence here watched. Chanel's pregnancy had moved into its 3rd trimester. Her belly full, her feet swollen. She moved through the house slowly now, one hand always trailing against a wall or a chair or the frame of a doorway, grounding herself. It became a ritual. She wouldn't go anywhere in the house without touching something solid. The baby had grown restless. Every night, around 3 a.m., it began kicking violently. Not once or twice, but in frantic, irregular bursts. She said it felt like it was trying to escape her body. Her OB said it was stress. Chanel didn't argue. What could she say? She had stopped sleeping in the master bedroom. She moved to the guest room at the back of the house, farthest from the studio. The air was clearer there, less dense. She could breathe. Darius stayed. Not because he didn't believe anymore. No, he believed too much. The house had changed him. It wasn't just fear now. It was obsession. A slow, quiet descent into fascination. He had begun spending hours alone in the booth, often with the lights off, headphones on, recording something. Sometimes he left the door open. Sometimes he locked it from the inside. When she knocked, he wouldn't answer. He started writing things in a journal. Pages of lyrics he claimed he heard in his sleep. Songs that didn't exist. Titles like, Still Here, in D sharp, and Her Breath Sounds Like Static. One entry was only 2 lines, written over and over. Play it right and she'll be safe. Play it wrong and she stays. On the night of the storm December 18th, the power went out just after 11 p.m. Rain fell in heavy, slanted sheets. The palm trees in the backyard thrashed against the fence like they wanted out. The wind howled through the eaves like a voice caught in an endless breath. Chanel lit candles and stayed in the kitchen, knees against her chest on the floor. She hadn't seen Darius in hours. He'd gone upstairs just after sunset and hadn't come down since. When she finally rose to check on him, the hallway light flickered once and died. The house had gone still, not quiet, not loud, just a low-pressure stillness, like before a tornado. The door to the studio was open, not wide, just enough. Enough to see that the light inside the booth, that old blinking recording light, was glowing steady red. No blinking now, just on, as if mid-session. And the music was playing. Not a tape, not a file, not a phone. Live. A voice. Piano. A beat slow and mournful, like a funeral procession just starting to remember joy. And layered beneath it like a shadow trailing too close, another voice. Not sung. Spoken. A whisper in the mix. Barely audible. Words that pulled behind the chords like hands behind curtains. Let her go. She don't belong here. She don't hear it right. Play it again. 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 She stepped inside. The air in the studio was heavy. The smell of old cologne and cigarettes had returned, stronger now, stinging the inside of her nose. Every breath was a taste of the past. Darius sat in the booth, headphones on, fingers hovering over the faders. Eyes closed, not asleep, listening. His lips moved, not forming words, just twitching in rhythm. The glow of the red light pulsed against his face like the beat of a silent metronome. She touched the doorframe. Darius? She whispered. He didn't answer, but the music stopped. Dead silence. Then slowly he opened his eyes. And when he looked at her, he wasn't afraid. He looked peaceful, calm, like someone who had finally remembered the name of a dream. She's safe now, he said. That was all. They left the next morning. Not in a rush, not in terror, just done. They packed a few bags, grabbed her medical folder, some ultrasound photos, a laptop, a coat. They didn't say goodbye to the house. They didn't try to sell it. They left the keys on the kitchen counter. They never spoke of it again. The baby was born 3 weeks later. A girl. Healthy. Wide-eyed and quiet. She didn't cry much. But sometimes, when she slept, she made little sounds, low, slow hums. Like chords. Like notes. The house still stands. It sits behind a wall of overgrown hedges. Its shutters slowly peeling. Its lights dark. The piano remains in the living room, covered now with a white cloth that grows grayer by the year. Sometimes, on hot summer nights, neighbors say you can hear music. Soft, distant, not always in tune. Just 3 notes. Again and again. Like someone's still trying to get it right. The property was never officially listed again. No realtor sign. No online postings. No cleanup crew. The mailbox rusted in place, stuffed with circulars and wet coupons. The gate sagged, as if tired of holding its own weight. The county records still list the address under the couple's name, but taxes are paid through an anonymous P.O. box in Oakland. No forwarding address. No contact. Some say they moved to Atlanta. Others say they left the country entirely. There's a rumor always whispered, never confirmed, that Chanel gave birth in a small birthing center that closed the next year, and that the baby didn't make a sound for the first 7 days. But when she finally did, it wasn't a cry. It was a single note, clear and deliberate, like it had been waiting to be in tune. Local kids dare each other to hop the fence, but few make it to the porch. Something about the air around the house, the way it feels like breathing through wool, or how the crickets stop chirping when you cross the path, makes most of them turn back. An Uber driver once dropped off a recording student who claimed to be doing a documentary about Ray Charles's personal studio. The driver waited 15 minutes, engine running. The kid never came back out. Only his camera was found leaning against the booth door. Battery dead. Tape full. The last minute of footage plays grainy and dark, but you can make out a figure behind the glass, not Ray, not Darius, just a shape. No face, no movement, just presence. The sound on the tape is all static until it isn't. Then a voice. Soft, male, warm, and utterly final. She don't need to know no more. The tape ends there. So does the curiosity. No one's entered since. And on certain nights, if the wind is just right, you might still hear the piano, deep inside that silent house. Just 3 notes, over and over. A song unfinished. A warning unheeded. A voice still waiting for someone to get it right. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.